Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and today I welcome Sylvia Plester-Silk, RSW. Now, Sylvia is an author and intuitive counselor who blends traditional therapy with energy work, and we're going to talk about that, to help individuals transform their lives. And with a background in social work and over 3 decades of experience, she has assisted thousands in navigating addictions, mental health issues, and trauma. And her latest book, Healing is Possible: 10 Things You Need to Know to Heal, excuse me, offers practical insights and strategies for achieving emotional freedom and living a more purposeful life. Sylvia's approach, which combines conventional wisdom with energy therapies, has proven really effective in facilitating healing and personal growth. Now, as an author, speaker, and podcaster, Sylvia also shares her expertise on topics like energetic stress management, and trusting your intuition. I wish I could talk today. Sylvia, you're going to have to do all the talking. So good morning, and thank you for sending me your book. It's in front of me.
Good morning, Denise, and thank you so much for having me as a guest.
Well, this is a topic that I happen to be passionately interested in. I don't know that I'm an intuitive, but I pay a lot of attention to my intuition. And when something tells me and I'm grabbing my stomach, don't do this, I don't do it. I've often relied on my intuition. But before we get going, can you share a bit about you and how you like to show up in the world?
A little bit about me. So I grew up in a very small town in Ontario, Canada, and I grew up in a very large family. I had 13 siblings. I now have 11 that are still living. And I grew up in a home where there was a lot of abuse. And I, very early in my 20s, my dad had his first heart attack. And I went into a crisis because I thought that somehow subconsciously he was going to die before I was done with him. And by done with him, I mean having worked through the pieces of the abuse that he did to me. And so I was in social work at that point when I had that crisis. So it was pretty natural for me to do as I say and actually reach out to a therapist. And so in my early 20s, I started therapy. And I found that I wasn't the bad one. I wasn't the crazy one, that I had legitimate reasons for feeling the way that I felt. And as I went through my own therapy, my ability to be a counselor and therapist became so much more rooted and grounded. I think because I was working through my own stuff, so the hard blocks that I had up before in trying to cope were released. But also, I began to believe in myself, and I learned the importance of holding space. Sometimes it's just being in the presence of someone who honors you so much that they listen and give space for your truth to unfold for yourself. And I hope that's what I do for my clients now. So I went from being a traditional social worker and trying to do all of the right things as a social worker and the right processes and being self-reflective in my practice. And then in 1995, I met this woman. Well, I met her before 95, but I was co-leading a group, and this woman, I had a headache that night, and she had learned this weird thing called therapeutic touch. And I was like, what is that? And I was like such a skeptical, closed person until I patronizingly said to her, yeah, okay, you can try and help me with this headache. And within 30 seconds, the headache flew off my head like a bad toupee on a windy day. And I went, what was that? And that is one of those life-changing moments that can never be undone, thankfully. And I started within 2 weeks. I was in my first class of therapeutic touch. And then I just did a deep dive for from then till about the early 2000s. I was always taking some course in energy therapy, in therapeutic touch, Reiki, in thought field therapy, emotional freedom technique, et cetera, in being intuitive because I, and to respond to your comment, Denise, I think we're all intuitives. It's us learning how to get out of our own way so that we can hear those internal signals. Uh,
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
yeah. And so I have just integrated, completely integrated now and given myself permission to be the weirdo that I am because it actually works. And I integrate energy work with traditional therapy techniques, and my clients reap the benefits because they get that level of emotional freedom and more joy in their lives. And
You
it's so
just
rewarding.
Oh, I can imagine. You mentioned therapeutic touch, and I'll be honest, I don't know much about that, but I do know what a hot rock massage is because I don't want anybody touching me.
Mhm.
I had a client give me a gift certificate for a massage, and I went, okay, I'll try it. I don't recall, but I think I ran out of the room screaming and mostly naked. I hated it.
Mm.
But then I was at an event and they said, well, try hot rock massage. And I was explaining, I don't like to be touched. And she did not touch me. Look, she had to help me off the table. I was a wet noodle when it was all over. So is that kind of the same thing? I don't understand. Tell me what therapeutic touch is because now I'm fascinated.
Okay, so therapeutic touch is a healing modality where you pretty much don't touch the person,
Good.
ironically.
That
Um,
would be good for me.
Generally, the touching, if it happens, and it doesn't need to happen, it's really based on permission and asking a client what they're comfortable with. Therapeutic touch, we start with getting grounded ourselves as a practitioner, and then we ground whoever we're working with. And that can happen just with intention, because energy always follows intention. It can happen by us touching their feet, or having them visualize going down into the ground with roots, or on their shoulders. If they prefer to be touched on their shoulders versus their feet, you can touch their shoulders. But there have been many, many times that I've given therapeutic touch and not touched the person. Certainly in my practice, touching is not a practice that I do because of the college that I belong to. However, it's moving your hands. So I'm moving my hands through the person's energy field, and I'm sensing and feeling for any blocks or any areas where there's energy lacking. And so as I sense it and as I come across an area, I will then just use my hands to release that area for them. And so the energy, what I'm trying to do is help their energy flow naturally, and so it's not like I'm going into your energy field to do this to you. It's I'm assisting your own body's natural healing rhythms and helping to help them flow a little bit better.
And I love what you just said about energy always follows intention. I recognize that on a daily basis. Honestly, no matter what I'm doing, I tend to use my intention, focus, and imagination a lot. And that follows through with action, intensity, imagination, energy. It's all, I've got it up on a card on my whiteboard. These are all important things to pay attention to daily, all the time. I wanted to ask you, Sylvia, in your book, Healing is Possible, and I have it in front of me. Thank you for sending that. You discuss inner guidance. So I guess my question here is, what are the consequences of ignoring our intuition? We always hear the stories, oh, I wasn't going to get on that plane and I didn't, or I did get on the plane and it crashed. I survived, but I don't feel so great now. We see these all the time. So how can we recognize when we are ignoring our intuition or if we don't trust our intuition?
I think that sometimes intuition comes to us in such a kind, gentle way that it's so easy for our critical minds to dismiss it. The number of times I've gotten wet on a beautiful sunny day because my little voice inside me says, take your umbrella. And I'm like, it's sunny. They're not calling for rain. Off I go, and the rain happens. Uh, that's a very small example of when you're not listening to your intuition. When we ignore our own wisdom, and let's face it, Denise, so many of us are taught not to pay attention to our inner wisdom, our intuition. We're taught that it's crazy. There's no way you could know that. That's not a fact. You're dumb. You're being like, there's so many labels and so much constriction that can happen around our intuition. And it's learning to trust yourself. And I'm a big, big, big proponent of journaling and keeping a journal where you're actually tracking, I had this sense or this feeling, or I heard this, or I saw this vision, and then tracking what happens as a result of it. Because you described, Denise, that you feel like a gut instinct.
Constantly. If I feel it in my stomach, if I catch myself, and I do physically, I'll be paying attention to something or not paying attention or listening to somebody, and all of a sudden I realize my hand is on my tummy and I stop. It's like, what is bothering me? What are they telling me? Is this baloney? Is this real? What's going on? And I will stop and I'll start listening to me rather than the person who's trying to sell me something or giving me a story that I'm just not really buying into it. But physically, if I'm touching my tummy, there's trouble, probably.
Right. Okay. So what you've done is beautiful because you've discerned where and how the messages come for you. And I think that's one of the number one challenges because I know when I was starting in this work in 95 and I'd do the old bad comparison game, and I still do it today from in some ways. And I'd look at somebody else and they'd be like, well, and I had this vision or I heard these words, and I'd be like, I don't get that. I'm not an intuitive. And I had to learn that my intuition comes to me most strongly in my physical body. And when I get words, they're so often so quiet. They're a whisper inside myself that comes from a different place in my body than my mind and my regular thoughts come to. So it's going into that level of discernment. Do you see things? Do you hear things? Do you sense things? Does it feel like a physical sensation in your body? Is it something like your body just will not allow you to go near? Sometimes our intuition comes and we think it's just fear, and we get all these messages about feel the fear and do it anyway. Sometimes the fear is intuition, and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
a
Don't
great,
do it. Yeah. If you're
that's
grabbing
time
your
for the
stomach,
great,
don't do
ex-
it.
exactly, time for the great pause and just sit with it and allow yourself to not do something if it doesn't feel right. I truly believe that we don't miss out any opportunities that are ours by what I call the divine right. I've been in the Akasha many, many times in my life, and I used to do readings professionally. And it's very clear that we come in with these certain tracks of possibilities, and we can switch from one track to another in a second. And so we don't miss opportunities. And that fear of missing out sabotages us listening to ourselves,
Oh, yeah.
really trusting ourselves.
Absolutely. And I wanted to go back to something you just said. We feel things, we hear things. If I'm getting some kind of a download, it can be spiritual, it can be God. I don't know who it is. I don't argue. And
Hmm.
I hear it in my left ear. Don't
Right.
know why I hear it in my left ear. But this is something else that I learned a long time ago when I'm in the shower. That's my favorite place to be, in the
Hmm.
shower. I will turn that thing up hot enough to steam broccoli. No joke. It's a good thing I have cathedral ceilings because I fog up everything. But when I'm in there, excuse me, I am big time relaxed, big time relaxed. And that's when my intuition or downloads start showing up. And I had to learn to tell, okay, if I hear myself internally, obviously, I'm going to do this. That's ego. I can discard
Hmm.
that. If I hear we're going to do this, that's a download from somewhere else. I take bathtub crayons in the shower with me and I scribble all over the stall walls. And then, an hour later, when I can see through the fog in there, I go in and take a picture and I write it down and I'm like, huh, that was brilliant. So I don't ignore things like this at all.
That's fabulous. And I think one of the things that you're doing is you're going into water energy. And water can be
Oh,
a huge amplifier as well as a grounding.
I
Um,
never thought of that. Keep going.
and that's why, I mean, so often my angels come to me in the bathroom. I know it's supposed to be private time. It used to be my dog, God bless her. But yeah, so I will get downloads, as you call it, or information, or I will just feel this intensity of my angels with me while I'm in the bathtub. And sometimes I've had clients, recently deceased people come to give me messages for them. And I prefer that to happen when I'm not naked in the
Naked.
bathtub. But
I was just thinking exactly what you were saying. It's like, really? You couldn't show up when I have my jammies on? What the heck?
one time it was a woman who had the person who had passed was a narcissist, and I'm like, your mom's at it again. She came to me this morning in the bath. And anyway, so it's really getting yourself grounded. And sometimes it's going into nature and being by big bodies of water. And if you don't live in a place with big bodies of water, going to a, a whatever it is, a lake, a river, a creek, going into your bathroom and having a bath. It for some people, it's being with the trees. I love to hug trees. I love
Me
to
too.
feel
And
the
seriously, I do.
vibration of them.
I've got these giant pecan trees in my backyard, and one of them is ill. She's not
Mm.
probably she's going to need to be cut down, and I keep going out there and saying, "But I love you. Don't go." And I don't know if
Yeah.
she hears me or not, but I feel better.
She certainly will because trees have a vibration and an energy in them that is so deep and real. And we don't acknowledge it as human beings. We think that animals are dumb. We think
No,
that nature
I
doesn't
don't.
have wisdom. And
Right.
let's face it, animals and nature have gone through a lot more than we have as human beings, and there's so much that they can teach us. They don't have the critical mind that we humans are kind of stuck with. And it's being in those places of open vibration where we can often most hear ourselves.
Exactly. And I'm laughing at your dog because, I'm in the middle of Hurricane Alley and,
Mm.
I've had my roof blown off. I mean, it is what it is. But I'll tell you what, if there's any kind of storm coming, my dog will let me know. And she's better than Jim Cantor of the Weather Channel any day of the week. If he shows up in Southwest Louisiana, we all go, oh, geez, not again. My dog's
Mm.
better than he is. I promise you she is. Listen, in your book, you mentioned different clairs, Claires, of intuition. Can you explain what these are and how people might identify their dominant intuitive style? Because I think I have a couple of them. I don't know which is dominant though.
Well, and I think that sometimes we have a dominant one, and as we work on our dominant ones, the others come forward as well. And that's been my experience. So I actually occasionally will see things now, and pick up things that are very different. So the clairs, I have to look at my notes here. Just bear with me for 1 second. I did write my book. It's just I'm an intuitive and I write and then I don't know what I pick. But the clairs are so clairvoyant is I hear. So those are the messages that we've described. It might be a voice. It could be a single word like a no or a yes. We have cognizance, which is just I know something. And there's no way that I know how I know. This one, in a funny way, comes out when we play games like Trivial Pursuit. And we have no idea what the answer is. But so often, the first response that comes into your mind is the correct response, and then our mind will come in and challenge it. There's no, sorry, sentience, clear sentience, which is that feeling in our body and sensing it. Okay, so let me think. I'm trying to think of which ones I've missed now. Uh, Help me out, Denise.
Well, and I had notes about it earlier, and I think I discarded those notes. But one of the things that I have noted, and I'll give you an example from when I was very young. I kind of figured out that I wasn't necessarily alone on this planet when I was
Mm-hmm.
quite young. And my father, who was a hypercritical kind of a guy, didn't
Mm-hmm.
believe in anything that he couldn't see, feel, or touch or spend. I mean, that was just how he
Mm-hmm.
lived his life. And the phone rang. We had just moved from another little small town into our brand new home. And the phone rang and it was Thanksgiving morning. And I remember saying very clearly, Grace died. Well, Grace was our neighbor at the other neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that she had been ill. She had cancer. I didn't know that until much later, but I just said out off the top of my head, Grace died. And he gave me this look like, what the heck? My mom answered the phone. She started crying. Grace had died. I got sent to my room and didn't get Thanksgiving dinner. And that left a lasting impression with me. Did I stop talking about it? No, because I'm pig-headed. But I'm going to do what I need to do. And I tend, like you, to see and hear a lot of things. I'll often almost be able to finish your sentence before you even started it. That's not
Right.
unusual, and I know you do that too. So I
Mhm.
think if we pay attention to our clairs and figure out what exactly they are, life can be a little bit easier. It can be scary. And you're like, where in the heck did that come from? But then you get to go on a voyage of discovery. So I don't ever worry
Mhm.
about it.
Well, and it's interesting because I remember as a child, I was having to have an afternoon nap. So I would be very young. I'm guessing about 4 years old. And so I was on my parents' bed napping, or was supposed to be. And I thought to myself, if I look out the window, there'll be a fire.
Hmm.
And I rolled over very carefully because if my feet were hurt out of the bed, I would have been in big trouble. And I managed to contort my little body and look out the window, and the neighbor's house was on fire. I yelled fire, and they looked out and they saw it. And my parents called the fire department. Now we were in the country, so unfortunately the house didn't get saved. But I have that little nugget of intuition that how would I have known that? It wasn't that I just looked out the window. I was told to look out the window.
Right. And that goes back to what I was saying. We are not alone here. And I'm not saying we have aliens next door. I might. I kind of worry about her. But and I look at politicians, they're all aliens or demons or something. I don't know what they are. I don't like them very much. But I have long held that we're not just our bodies. We are
Mhm.
energy. We are energetic. There's a lot that the world is sharing with us. And if we ignore that, I don't even know what that would feel like. I've never ignored it.
I think that's what happens when we feel shut down and abused, and when we're afraid to be ourselves because we've been criticized. So when we're negated in our beingness, in our intuition, and we're stuck thinking and believing we're all alone. And when people grow up in homes where there's tons of abuse and they've been threatened not to speak of it, either physically or they just know that it's not safe. If I say anything, I'm going to be punished even deeper. Then you get into this deep constriction energy, and it makes it harder to trust yourself because you're so afraid all the time and you're afraid of being wrong. You're afraid because perhaps your parents' inconsistencies. So one time you do something and you're praised for it, and the next time you get slapped or laughed at or told you're wrong and stupid. And so many of us grow up in these homes And we come to believe the crap that's piled on us, that we're not special, that we're not valid, that we're not worthy. And to me, that's what I want to help people get over and see the reality that we are not alone. And many of us have been in those dark moments where we thought about, is this worth living? And it's
Yeah,
about finding the people that can hear us, that can champion us,
right.
finding somewhere in our lives, whether it's with animals, whether it's with a person, whether it's listening maybe to a podcast like this, where you just get to know it is okay to be you. The fact that you are alive on this universe means there's some value in you. And we're
I
not
agree with you.
necessarily our behavior.
No, and I wish more people understood that. I really do. I mean, look, I'm not always proud of myself. There's days I'm like, what the heck did you just do today? Well,
Mhm,
either apologize or don't if it's,
mhm.
necessary. But mostly I'm apologizing to myself because I let myself down. But then I
Yeah.
say, don't do that one again. I found my notes: clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, and claircognizance, I think.
Okay, I
I was
did them.
scribbling. So yeah, my
And then
notes
there's
are very
also
messy.
there's mixed senses too. So I've just recently hired on a graphic designer to help me with some work for my business. And when I speak, she sees visions. So I'm like so excited to see what we create together for my business for visuals. Um, and so you can have them crossed over where some people taste stuff, some people will smell stuff. I know that initially for me, when deceased people came to me, it was through my sense of smell. I would, and maybe this sounds weird, but here we go. Uh, my grandfather had a certain scent to me when he was alive. And I would all of a sudden, I remember doing the dishes one day and smelling him after he had passed. When my sister Mary Lynn passed away, I had gone to my office and I smelt perfume. And I don't wear perfume because I have sensitivity. And I ask my clients not to wear scented products as well. And I went into my office and I could smell it. And I'm like, nobody's been in my office. How can there be a smell of perfume in here? And I went out into the hallway and I started sniffing in the hallway, trying to see if it was there. And no, it wasn't there. It wasn't somebody that sort of walked by and the scent came in. And I went back into my office and then it hit me. That was the perfume that my sister used to wear. And so we can also smell things, which is kind of crazy making because it's like, where are we? I recently did some very deep work on a mother wound with a client and getting her abusive mother's energy out of her field. And all of a sudden, my office filled with this smell of smoke that was so heavy.
Ouch.
And she left and it was still there and I was saging and I was doing all sorts of different clearing work and one of my colleagues came in and she said, "Who's been smoking?" My client doesn't smoke, had not been in a smoking environment, but that smoke filled the room and it was her mother's um, disgust at being caught out for the behavior and the way that she parented. And
Gotcha.
probably some, I hope, some regret in how that parenting happened. And
Yeah.
so I guess what I'm saying is a couple of things. When we have a weird experience, pay attention, don't just ignore it. And often when we have intuitive senses, there's a lightness to it. It's often like a little bit of inspiration, and there's a curiosity that comes with it. But when we think about things in our mind and when it's fear, there's often a heaviness with it. It feels like it's pulling us down, where intuition feels lighter, like it's pulling us up. And it's just like something that just floats in the air. You get the message and it floats back out because you've received the message. And then we're in personal choice, what we do or don't do with that information.
There you go. And you're talking about your clients. I had, and she was murdered by a truck. The most perfect dog in the world. Her name was Abby Rose Griffiths. And I will never forget this dog. I mean, she was just part of me in a way. And when she was killed, then she's buried in my backyard. For weeks after that, I would hear her tags.
Hmm.
And that, finally went away. But and it was always when I was asleep or, waking
Yes.
up, and I would
Yeah.
hear her tags and I would reach out to pet her. She wasn't there, obviously, but she was,
Hmm.
if that makes any sense.
It makes total sense. My dog Tiffy used to tip tap on the stairs, and I would hear her. And just around the time that my last dog, Josie, who was my soul dog, left, I heard Tiffy come up the stairs, and I was like, ah, it's getting
I know.
close.
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
I denied that little bit of intuition because I didn't want to deal with that reality of losing my dear Josie.
It happens,
Uh,
and I'll be
yeah.
honest with you, I grieve for my pets far more than I do most humans. And
Hmm.
I don't know what that makes me other than maybe hard-hearted, but they don't hurt our feelings. They don't steal the keys to the car and go running around and get arrested. They don't take money out of your purse and buy ice cream with it. They don't hurt our feelings until they leave.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
pets, I'll take pets most. And I like people just fine for 59 and 3/4 minutes. But after that, give me my dog or a cat. You just give me some kind of pet. Okay, your book offers practical advice for everyday life. It's a great little book. I've reviewed it, I've read it. So my question here is how can we effectively partner with our intuition? And we've talked a bit about this, but in both of our personal and professional lives. Because I don't
Mm.
think you can split them up. It is
No.
what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we get figure out which part of your life intuition comes most easily for you. Is it at work? Is it at home?
At home
Is it
because
when you're playing?
I'm an introvert. Everything I
Mhm.
do is here, so it's always home. But I
Right.
don't believe in work-life balance. To me, they're you cannot separate them. It's all the same thing. But for me, it is at home because this is where I'm comfortable.
Hmm. And so wherever it comes most easily for you, again, I'm going to nag about journaling because that's my thing, and take notes. Where am I getting these messages that come through? If you get a message with the sense of a date, write that date down. Don't dismiss it. Uh, and then what happens when the date comes? Is there some truth in what you picked up? And sometimes intuition isn't literal. You might see a red canoe, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going somewhere in a red canoe. It may mean that it's something significant about the color red. It may mean there's going to be travel in your life. And I don't believe in these books that says a red canoe means this because we're too individual. What's a red canoe mean to you? So I think that we can be intuitive at our jobs. I think, let's face it, people have been intuitive forever because how do people come up with some of these inventions? Like, how did anyone ever think of using a pig's um, pancreas to create insulin as a to help with diabetes? Like, or horse urine for hormone replacement. Like,
Ouch.
there's
Is
so
that a real thing?
it
Ouch.
was.
Oh, ick.
Yeah. And so like that's what I mean. There's like those thoughts had to be so bizarre in that moment, and yet had they ignored them, people would have died. Or
Right,
people would
right.
have died. People would have continued dying, I suppose is how I should have said it. And so that's how important our intuition is, right? Is it's our internal guidance system of how to go forward. And so sometimes, Denise, we need to get the garbage out of the way. And I mean that no disrespect when I call it the garbage, but it's that stuff that's been placed on us and the negative beliefs we have about ourselves and those constricting emotions that we deny or that we hide from ourselves. And it's about really learning to go in and know yourself so well that you remember your true essence separate from what's happened to you. And then in our true essence, we can feel and be more open that we actually can be these miraculous people who have the ability to hear, see, feel, sense, taste, smell, whatever it is for you, to just be in that truth of their knowingness.
And I'm going to tell you what I have always felt, and I'll defend this with my dying breath, that there are no new ideas. There's a huge universe, and that's probably not the right word. It's a little constrictive, but there is energy out there that we have no idea where it all came from. Look at some of the things that Nikolai Tesla did.
Mm-hmm.
He he worked miracles, and it came
Mm-hmm.
from his imagination. It came from somewhere. So I believe firmly that our imagination should not be stifled.
Well, and there's also the thought, and I believe there's some truth to this. If you're given gifted or given an idea intuitively and you don't follow through with it, don't get pissed off when somebody else is gifted that because
Oh,
you
it
just
happens all the
attach and
time. Like
yeah,
when I
exactly.
tell you there are no new ideas, I talk with a lot of people about their websites, about this, that, and the other, and they say, "Oh, I've got this brand new idea," and I'm thinking, I bet you don't, but let's
Mhm.
hear it. And I'm not being negative. I just want to know where it came from and what they're going to do with it.
Well, and I think, Denise, it is new because it's in their voice and it
Right.
hasn't been spoken in their voice or in their tone.
But when you go look, it's out there.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's sometimes we need I mean, I think about when I got my glider pilot license, I was paired with an instructor who I could not learn a thing from, and I'm a reasonably intelligent person, and I could not land my plane, and I was like the least favorite person because it was hot days, and they'd all have to push my glider back to where I should have landed. And finally, things came together and conspired to support me, like so often happens. And I was coupled with Brad as my new flight inspector or instructor, pardon me. And on my first flight up with him, he gave me a visual point of when to know to fly to land. And that landing, I landed where I was supposed to land. The shouts and cheers that the people, that my colleagues and my fellow cadets didn't have to go down the flippin' hot runway
It's like she
and push
finally
me
got it.
back. It was like I won the entire Olympics. Um, right? So it's like we need to hear it sometimes from a different voice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to ask you too, what are some, and we may have touched on this a little bit, we're talking about so many things, but what are some of the common obstacles that people face when trying to trust their intuition or even discover that they have intuition? I am often shocked by people who just, they don't even know they have it. And I'm
Hmm.
like, how can you not know? So if they're trying to trust their intuition, how can they overcome the barriers that you talked about? Our brains, our minds. It's like, oh, you can't do that. Oh, you can't do that. I don't use the word can't, by the way.
Hmm.
I will often use the word don't, or my
Hmm.
favorite, won't. And I'll
Right.
tell you, I don't swim because guess what? You know why I don't swim, but it's it's you push me in a lake or I'm going to drown. It's going to be your fault.
Right.
You're going to jail. Don't touch me. But I'm often shocked by people who just display no intuition or internal dialogue at all.
I think they do, but it's
Do
so
they?
scary they just shut it down. If I'm taught that I don't have power or that
Gotcha.
in a strict religious background where it's unacceptable and only certain people have that gift, or I am taught that I'm too stupid in whatever ways that might be and whatever tone that is, then I don't trust myself enough. And so for me, it's going in and doing some of that emotional work and befriending our emotions, right? Getting rid of some of these old patterns that have been thrust upon us and that as young children we'd made subconscious decisions and created negative beliefs that are limiting about ourselves that we continue to play out. So, what are those patterns? And I talk about patterns a lot in the book because the patterns can be changed. And that's the really empowering part. Really awful stuff can happen to us as human beings, and we can shift it. We can heal. We truly can heal. And that's why I called the book Healing is Possible. So, that's one thing is what are the pieces of yourself that might feel broken? And trust me, you are not broken. It may feel that way, but you're not broken. And so many people feel they're broken. And it's no, you're not. And you don't need to be fixed. And there may be pieces of patterns that you would love to release. And these can be done. And I show you how in the book, how to do that. I think too another way that we get so busy and we get so distracted, and I think a lot of us are being distracted by now by the political economic stuff that's happening in our world, and we are watching the news and it's pulling us away from ourselves into this outer focus, and how you get grounded, how you come back into your own personal center is what also helps you. And that helps you then discern if I'm grounded and I get an intuitive message, it's easier for me to discern if that's coming from my intuition or my mind. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm not grounded, I might follow something and it may make absolutely zero sense, but I'm following something out of a fear instead of my intuition. So
And
just getting
habit, I
grounded.
think a lot of it, listen, I turned off legacy news over 10 years ago. I realized that it was not largely propaganda. It is propaganda.
Hmm.
And I don't let those people in my living room fix
Hmm.
that. But I
Well, who
wanted
would you
to,
invite to dinner? Would you invite that
exactly.
energy in to say, please come dine
No.
with me? Then maybe it
Yeah.
says, one of my friends recently said to me, it's a no thank you for me.
Yeah. And I will tell, and I often make exactly the correlation that you did. If I'm not letting them through the front door, I'm not letting them come through the airwaves either. And
Hmm.
I wanted to go back just a little bit. We were talking about, these things that you believe as a child. I grew up in a large family as well, and my father did not like girls. He wanted boys. He wanted sons. Well, they turned out to
Hmm.
disappoint him greatly because they didn't like him anyway.
Right.
But I remember one time when I was still speaking with him, and I did that very little because he was a difficult person.
Hmm.
And he was bragging about his IQ, and I listened. I didn't say much. And the next day, I was walking with my neighbor who was a psychologist. We were walking around our lake, and I was, sharing that story with her. She said, "Come by my house. I'll give you an IQ test." I stomped him all over the ground with my test. I was
Right.
higher than he was by 5 points. We're both very high IQ individuals. He's passed now. He
Hmm.
didn't speak to me for about 2 years. He said, "Well, I don't believe that." And I said, "What's your email address?" And I sent it to him, and that shut him up for a while. But I have to be honest, I took a lot of joy stomping on what I thought was the truth, that he was smarter than everybody else in the room, that because I was a female, I didn't have much worth. It was cathartic. It was mean, but it was cathartic.
And I think there's ways for us to release those patterns without being mean and then without feeling that judgment of having been mean. And it's it's getting in touch with where it is in our physical bodies, in our energy fields, and then going into that energy and understanding what's underneath it. Because so often as young children, we create beliefs. So, for example, one of my clients, and she's okay with me sharing this story, um, she was about 2 years old, and her older brother, who was in his teens, got up and walked out to go to school one morning. She followed him. Her parents didn't notice for whatever reason, weren't that attentive, perhaps. He didn't notice that she was following him. She got lost. picked up, taken to the police station. It was a smaller town, so the police knew whose child it was. They called the parents. The mother came in and she was immediately angry with her. And in that
With the
second,
little girl?
with the little 2-year-old,
Was that fright or was she genuinely
uh,
angry?
I just want to finish my story. I
I'm
don't know what
sorry.
it was, and it really kind of is irrelevant. I'm sure it was probably fear. But in that moment, that little 2-year-old decided the only way to be safe is to make sure that mom's needs are always looked at. After I have to make sure mom is happy. And she became a compulsive caretaker.
Oh,
Yeah.
how did she get past that?
Well, we went in one day and we were doing some intuitive work, and I got age of 2. And I said to her, I doubt you'll remember this, but I'm getting age 2. What's that about? And she said, I know what it's about. It's a family story. And so then I helped her regress to her 2-year-old self. And we went in and felt the energy around it. And then she realized that that's what she had come to believe and how unrealistic it was, and how it was a 2-year-old making a choice that no longer made sense in her life. And then we did some energy techniques to release it. And my work is so confidential and intuitive that I don't often remember exactly what I've done with someone. But I just generally, that's what we did. So we went in, she would have felt the feelings of it and then done some release work.
Sounds like she needed it. Nobody wants to become a permanent caretaker. I sure don't. Um,
Hmm.
what are some simple exercises or practices that our audience can start today to strengthen their intuitive abilities? And I know that, you talk about working with a practitioner or doing some of it on your own, but what can they do today to start saying, oh, maybe I need to start listening to myself better? Just talk.
So
Tell it,
I
tell
think,
us.
okay, so then I would say go into become the curious young child. You know, the curious child that's playing baseball, and you find them, they're out in the fields looking at the daisies and picking daisies. So be that curious young child with sort of a playful, light heart, and start to explore and notice. What does it feel when I'm in emotion? How does that feel in my body? What kinds of thoughts come to me? When I'm in my mind and I'm heavily thinking about something, what does that feel like in my body? What does that feel like in my soul? And then when I get these little thoughts, feelings, experiences that are unknown and mysterious, what does that feel like? So it's starting to discern and pull apart the different parts of ourselves so that we can see, maybe that's a bad term to use, we can recognize when we're getting intuitive information in our own personal way. So it's discernment, it's staying grounded, when we have emotion, allowing ourselves to feel it and creating safe space for us to feel it. So sometimes that's with the therapist, sometimes that's hugging up to our dogs or cats and letting the tears cry and allowing them to be present and hold space for us. Sometimes it's talking to a friend who doesn't butt in and judge or doesn't bring their experience in, but has space for you. And as we have these experiences and we can validate ourselves and feel those emotions, we can then breathe out and release the emotion. And we have what I call emotional freedom from that experience. And as we do that more and more, and we release the feelings and we recognize the thinking, because I'll tell you, other than I need to go to the store and I need to remember today that I have to pick up vegetables, bread, and milk, our mind doesn't do a lot for us. So much of it is intuitive, so much of it is our emotions. And when we try and lead by our brain alone, we're missing so much information that's happening. So it's really getting in touch with ourselves, trusting ourselves, taking note, noticing little nuances and differences, and and honoring ourselves that we possibly can be that miraculous.
Oh, I believe that we are complete and total miracles. I wanted to ask you, and this is completely off topic, or it may be, but lucid dreaming. I
Mm.
lucid dream every day. and I didn't even know that that's what I was doing. I came across the term some years ago and went, oh, because listen, I have woken up and I don't sleep a whole heck of a lot anyway. But when I'm lucid dreaming, I'm active and I have woken up just exhausted because I was traveling somewhere. One time I was dancing on a wooden floor. I don't dance, but I was having a good old time. I was barefoot and I was dancing. I promise you, I woke up and my feet hurt. I
Right.
hadn't budged from my bed, but that's what happened. So is lucid dreaming something that we should pay attention to, or what do you know about it?
That's not an area I know a ton about, but generally I would say to you, pay attention to the messages and what's happening in that lucid dream. So it may be a literal translation, like, okay, so for dancing, maybe it's you needed more play in your life. It could mean that you needed to dance around somebody that you were dealing with or working with in some certain way. Uh, right? It might mean even that you need to have your feet looked at. So that's what I mean when I talk about nobody else can tell you exactly what your intuition means. It's
Right,
listening to yourself. And I talk about creating your own dictionary of meaning. And sometimes it's helpful to research and go, okay, what does swan energy mean to this person? And you can read it, and but discernment, it becomes very important too. What part of that jumps out at me? I pick oracle cards on a regular basis, and sometimes it's looking at the visual. And what is the visual? What, like, as I glance at this card, what's popping out to me? Right? And so the same with your lucid dreaming. What are the messages you're getting? How does that apply to life? And if it's not applying to life today, take note of it. Do something that you can remember it, because often when I have a dream, I may not remember it. So as we wake up really quickly, just taking a couple of notes so that we can remember the content of it. There are also thoughts that we live in a parallel universe. So that's also possible that you were somewhere else that night dancing and your feet were physically sore because another part of your soul was actually dancing.
so that's kind of where my mind goes. But you
Hmm.
mentioned earlier that you were suggesting that we journal about our intuition. I
Mhm.
haven't done that yet, and I have a whole basket full of blank journals that I'll add that to. But I do journal my lucid dreams because sometimes they're like, what the heck was that? And I don't want to forget them, and I do want to revisit them and say, oh, well, there it is. It came to pass, or now I understand it. So in fact, I'm not going to add a new journal. I'm just going to start adding my intuition to my lucid dreaming and kind of combine them. So
That's
thank you for
beautiful.
that.
That's
I
good.
want, before I let you go, and we are running out of time, how has your understanding of intuition evolved throughout your career, and how is this reflected in your latest book? And there's a companion book, isn't there?
Yes. Okay. So intuition for me, I didn't for many years before 1995, I didn't think I had it. And I talk about in the book in 95 when I learned that I actually had intuitive abilities and how they came to me. So I'll leave that as a little cliffhanger. And so for me, I had to learn to stop comparing myself to the people that I call more intuitive than me. I had to learn that the way that it came to me was valid, and I had to just begin to honor it. And so today, when I have what I'll call weird experiences, I don't dismiss them. I'm like, "Ooh," I lean into it with a curiosity of, "What was that? Hmm." And then I'll just sit with it and let it be. And as we sit with it, it sometimes comes to being, maybe a week down the road, maybe 3 months down the road. Now I get it. Okay, I was being given information that this was coming forward. Oh, cool. That's how I got that information. Okay. That's another thing to add to my intuitive dictionary.
Got it.
Okay.
Well, listen, thank you so much, Sylvia, for joining us today. But before we wrap it up,
Mhm.
is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience? And where can they connect with you? And how can they find your book, Healing is Possible 10 Things You Know You Need to Know to Heal?
You can get my book in your local Amazon account. worldwide. You can get Healing is Possible as well worldwide. You can connect with me through my new podcast at 10minutestojoy.com. You can hear me every Friday if you wish. And you can go to my website, onpurposetransformations.ca, because I am Canadian, eh?
Oh, I would not have noticed that. And you're also an Audible. I was looking in Amazon this morning and your podcast is an Audible.
Yes, that's very exciting.
Well, listen, thank you, Sylvia, so much. And everybody, in today's episode of Your Partner in Success Radio, we explored the transformative power of intuition with Sylvia Plester-Silk. She is the author of Healing is Possible. And we discussed the different clairs, CLAIRS, which honestly I had not heard of, even though I tend to tap on most of them. The different clairs of intuition, practical tips for strengthening intuitive abilities, and how to integrate. I can't talk. This is the time of the podcast. I'm like, blah, 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 blah. My tongue quits working. And how to integrate intuition into daily life. So to connect with Sylvia Plester-Silk and learn more about her work, visit her website at onpurposetransformation.ca. As she noted, she is Canadian. I don't hold it against her, though. And you can also follow her podcast, 10 Minutes to Joy, for weekly inspiration and healing techniques. And don't forget to check out her book. It's on Amazon. The companion journal is there. And, read those to help drive deeper into your own healing journey. Sylvia, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Denise. I've enjoyed our conversation very much.
Me too.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.